Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Steeked Cardigan Knit Along with Marley Bird. We are in the third and final week of this knit along, and it has been so much fun seeing your progress online as you work through the yoke of the cardigan, then the body of the cardigan. Now we're to the sleeves, the actual steeking, and the button band. Arguably, this part has been the most anticipated part of this knit along, and you've made it here, so congratulations. We're going to start off this process for this section with the sleeves. We're going to talk about the thumb holes, and then I'm going to show you how to prepare your fabric for steeking, how to actually cut your fabric, and then how to pick up those stitches for the button band. You are so close to the finish of this cardigan, so make sure you don't give up now. Follow along with all of the tips and tricks I show you as we go through this entire video, so that way you don't happen to make a mistake and get off track somewhere, okay? So just trust me, we're gonna walk through this process. I have spent the last 3 or 4 days preparing for this video to make sure I give you what it is you need to know to work on this cardigan and actually steek it, knowing that you're going to be cutting your cardigan and I don't want you to mess up either. So I've been a little stressed out on my end. So now that you know you're not the only one who's been stressed, hopefully that makes you feel better and you're ready to go ahead and continue on. So what I need you to do is grab that pattern. You should have that in your hand by now. Get your homework, grab your yarn, both colors, because you're going to need both colors today. Grab a good pair of scissors, some stitch markers, a tapestry needle, a sewing needle, and we're going to dive in. All right, let's do this. Let's take each section at a time. At the end of the last video, I left you to complete the body of your cardigan. So by now you should have your pockets complete, the body of your cardigan is complete, and your yoke is complete all the way through. If you haven't already, you can actually try on your cardigan at this point as a pullover. Simply put it over your body and kind of see if you like how it fits. It just doesn't have sleeves yet, which is an easy remedy, and we're going to do that in this video. But go ahead and try it on. See if you like the way the cardigan fits so far. Essentially, those steek stitches that we're going to cut, that's going to take, or the button band is going to take that place. So this is the way your cardigan's going to fit if it were all buttoned up. Speaking of the sleeves, they're going to be very easy to jump into and complete because we've already put stitches from a holder onto some needles before when we did that down here for the pocket lining. So we already know how to do that. The little trick I do want to show you is how to pick up stitches right here at the join from the sleeve to the body. There's a little trick you can do to try and help prevent a gap. So we're going to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk to you about how to add the thumb hole should you choose to add that. The sleeves actually are very easy to do, so let's go ahead and take a look at the swatch. And I'm bringing back the swatch from the previous video. I've gone ahead and started one of the sleeves on this swatch so that way I can use this to show you how to do the thumb holes when we get to it. But we're gonna go ahead and jump over here to this sleeve. Right now, all of your sleeve stitches are on scrap yarn, which is beautiful. And we know how to put stitches from scrap yarn onto a needle. So that's all I've done right here. I've taken my larger double pointed needles, and I have just slipped them through all of the stitches that were on the holder. Notice I have not removed my scrap yarn holder. I'm actually going to leave that in place and let it act as a lifeline. So that way, should something mess up along the way here, and I want to rip back to where I am at the beginning without messing anything up, I have the scrap yarn already in place. So I'm just going to ignore that pink yarn. I've not done anything special right here other than just stick the needle through the stitches, and now I'm ready to pick up stitches according to the pattern. Now you guys already know, working through this pattern, all the sizes have their own corresponding number. So just like the rest of the pattern, you want to make sure you're following along with the numbers that pertain to the size you are making. Obviously, my little swatch here is not at all to scale, so we're just going to be jumping in with numbers willy-nilly on here. But for you, you want to make sure you're picking up the number as indicated. You're going to begin by picking up stitches at your cast on edge. And the pattern itself will tell you to pick up either 5 stitches, 6 stitches, 7 stitches, 8 stitches, whatever it may be. And you're going to start in the middle of this underarm, okay? The reason you want to start in the middle is because that will be the beginning of your round. And as you work your decreases to shape your sleeve, you will work those at that center point. So this underarm position is very important. Put it at the center of the underarm as close as you can as possible. Okay, let's get started with the sleeve. I'm going to go ahead, grab my extra double pointed needle, starting at the center of my underarm. I know that I want to pick up 2 stitches over here and 2 stitches over here. Then I know that per our instructions, we're supposed to pick up 1 stitch in between our bind off edge and our stitch that's on a holder. Now, I know from experience that I will pick up 1 stitch and I'm going to get a hole. So what I like to do is essentially pick up those stitches before I actually am picking up and knitting, and then I'm going to knit those 2 stitches together. So I'm deviating from the pattern because this is the tip section that you get the benefit of having because you're doing this knit along. So follow along with me here. I'm actually going to set this needle down. And I'm going to grab the needle over here that has this series of stitches on it. And looking at all of these stitches between my bind off edge and where my stitch is, you can see there's a strand right here. And this strand is coming from the stitch on my needle now. It's this strand right here, okay? I'm going to pick that up with this needle from back to front, okay? Then if you follow that strand around, you'll see that it comes out over here. You see that? I'm going to pick that one up from front to back. So I have just picked up 2 strands of yarn in the area between my stitches and my bind off. What I'm going to do is where the pattern says to pick up and knit 1 stitch, I'm actually going to knit these 2 strands together. I am going to eliminate that 1 stitch because I picked up 2, right, to really hide the hole. By doing a knit 2 together, that's going to get me to 1 stitch, which is identical to as if I had picked up and knit 1 stitch. All right, you guys with me on that? So I've put those on that needle. Now I'm going to come back over here and we're going to start over here. Grab my needle, grab my yarn, and I have 4 stitches here. So I'm going to find my column of V's, and I'm actually just going to go right in between a V right here. I'm just going to go right in between, yarn over my needle, and pull up a loop. Go right into the next V, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So I've pulled up and picked up the knit 2 stitches. So this would be like if you picked up a knit 5 stitches. Then the instructions say to pick up 1 stitch and knit between the bind off, the cast on, I should say, and the stitches on the holder. So that's what we did right there. That's what we preemptively did. So it's at this point, I'm actually going to knit those 2 together. And you'll notice that these 2 strands that I picked up, one of them is oriented on our needle in the manner that is traditional. The other is oriented where the back leg is ahead of the front. I want them to be that way because that will twist the stitch and really close up any gap I have there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and this is going to be tricky because this leg over here of this stitch doesn't want to be knit, right? It's the back leg that wants to be knit, but we're going to force it into submission. So I'm going to bring it up here. I'm going to get into that stitch. It's a little tricky with these blunt needles. So I'm into that stitch and the other one. So those are the 2 strands that I pulled up, and I'm knitting them together. And by doing that, I have the resulting pick up and knit 1, but I've also really closed up this gap between my armhole. You see that? All right, so the next part of your instructions say to go ahead and knit 1 stitch, and then you're supposed to work a decrease. So we're going to do an SSK. So I'm going to slip 1 as if to knit, slip 1 as if to knit, and then knit those 2 stitches together. You see that? Then it says I'm supposed to knit around to the last 3 stitches. So it's the last 3 stitches of the stitches that were on the holder. So when you get done with one needle, go ahead and transition over so that you're to the next needle, the next double point. Make sure you are not getting into your scrap yarn. Just let it hang out there. Don't actually knit into it. As I rotate around, let me move those there. When I get to the end of this needle, remember I'm supposed to get to the last 3 stitches of this needle. So that's where I am right now. I'm to the last 3 stitches of this needle. This is where I'm going to do a knit 2 together because this is what the pattern tells me to do, okay? This is why I'm following these instructions. This would be the first part of the sleeve. So I need to do this knit 2 together, but I want to make sure I'm not getting my scrap yarn. So I'll do that knit 2 together. Then you'll see that it says to knit 1. Now the instructions indicate I'm supposed to pick up and knit that 1 stitch again between the stitches that were on the holder and the cast on stitches. So looking down here, we are going to make sure that we are picking up those 2 stitches again, just like we did before, and we're going to knit them together. So I want to find the string I'm going for here, and it's going to be attached to the mother stitch of this one, okay? So it's going to be attached to the stitch below the one on my needle. So if I follow that through, it's going to be this one right here, okay? Now I want this stitch to be picked up from back to front. So I'm going to pick that one up from back to front. And as I follow the path of that stitch, is it that one? Follow through. And I think it's that one. I'm going to go from front to back. You just make sure you follow the stitch and I'm from front to back. Now that we have those 2 strands on our needle, we're going to treat them as a decrease again so we get down to that 1 stitch that we need in the pattern. So here we go. I'm going to play around here and I'm going to do a knit 2 together again just to kind of see what it looks like because I think that's going to close my hole really nicely. You can see there, it just closes things up really nice and neat. I'm left with the 1 stitch I need. And now I can go ahead and pick up the other 2 stitches right here on the other half of my armhole. So I'm going to find my column, go into the V. I'm going to go ahead and just continue using this needle because it's convenient. And boom. So I have everything distributed around 3 needles at this point because I just picked up and kept going. But you'll notice that right here where I started, that is considered my start of the round. Okay, I'm just pulling my starting yarn nice and snug. So this would be the start of my round. So as I continue my sleeve, I would continue to work my decreases around this center point. That will allow my decreases to work along the bottom of my sleeve, sort of out of the way. It's not meant to be a design feature. And now that everything is set up, you simply follow the instructions and work all the way down to where it's time for the thumb hole. You know how to do these decreases. You know how to follow instructions. You don't need me to show you that. But the thumb hole might be something new. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, I have all of these stitches on here. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of these. I'm gonna show you how easy this is just to get rid of if something were messed up. Boop, and they're still on my holder. Super convenient. Okay, so I can move that out of the way, pop this over here so I don't have all these needles in play. And here is a sleeve for us to look at. Now, obviously I chose a different color. I wanted you to be able to see how everything looks. You can see that my stitches at my underarm, they look really great and neat using that technique that I just showed you. I did not work any decreases on this particular sleeve because it's already super tiny and I would have been left with like no stitches to show you. But we're going to pretend that it's time for our thumb hole. So essentially the thumb hole is worked when you get down to the ribbing for the cuff of your sleeve. So your sleeve goes all the way down practically to right where your hand is. And then we're going to leave an opening right where our thumb's gonna be. It's so ridiculously easy that you're gonna wanna add it to everything, just like the pocket, you guys. When you get down to where the thumb hole is supposed to be, the first thing you're gonna do is work that first round of knit one, purl one all the way around, okay? That sort of gets us prepped for where the thumb hole is going to go. So I'm just going to work a round of knit one, purl one. This is a great opportunity for you to switch over to the smaller double pointed needles. Go ahead and do it on this first round. Let's divide for the thumb holes. It's as easy as this. Simply turn your work. That's right. We're going to leave this little opening here. So when you turn your work, you're going to be on the wrong side and you're going to continue on in the ribbing pattern that you just established on the previous round. So you're going to knit your knits and purl your purls all the way to the end of the row. We will work in these rows for the number of times indicated in the pattern or until you have a cuff that's as long as you want it to be with your thumb hole. When you get to the end of the last needle, once again, you will turn your work and work back so that you can get to the end of the row. You would continue on working in this manner, okay? You're going to work in these rows. You'll repeat these last two rows 4 more times. Now, that's going to give you a nice long cuff for you to, have your thumbs in and have the cuff come down a little bit around your hand. If you want the cuff a little bit longer, you can make it longer. If you want it a little bit shorter, you can make it shorter. As a matter of fact, if you don't want the thumb holes at all, you don't need to add them. There are instructions written out for you if you don't want to add these thumb holes. Simply, you're just going to work in the round in the knit one, purl one ribbing for the distance listed in the pattern. It's really that easy. When you go to bind off these stitches, you do want to bind off in pattern, and you're going to also change colors on the last 2 rounds because we want that little nice contrasting color edge that we have around the collar, around our button band, around the bottom of our sweater, and around the cuffs. So don't forget to change colors on those last 2 rounds, and then don't forget to bind off in pattern. Very easy. Okay. Now that we know how to do the sleeve and how to prepare the thumb hole and finish off our cuff, it's time for the big enchilada. It's time to prepare our sweater for steeking. Now at this point, if you have not tried on your sweater, if you did not take that opportunity before, your sleeves are done, go ahead and try it on. Make sure everything fits the way you like it. Make sure your sleeves are long enough. Like it's gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is great. And you might even be thinking to yourself, oh, do I really need to steek this? This fits really nice. I'm so scared to steek. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm telling you, steeking is your friend. It's really not that difficult, especially if you prepare the way I'm going to teach you how to prepare. All right, so go ahead, grab your swatch that we used before, grab your sweater that you just finished knitting, and grab some scissors, tapestry needle, and some yarn, preferably a contrasting color. All right, I'll see you back here and we're gonna steek. Any of you tell your family that you just put all of this time into making a sweater and now you're getting ready to cut it? Do they think you're crazy? Trust me, this is like one of the coolest things ever and you are going to absolutely love it. The first thing we're going to do though is prepare. We're going to practice on those swatches that we did because we all pinky sweared that we were going to make those swatches before we started our sweater. So grab that swatch because that's where we're going to begin. If you take a look down here, you can see I have pinned out my little swatch. Like this is just a little swatch I worked up and I have simulated the purl stitches right here with the 10 stitches right here for the steeking that you have on your sweater, okay? I've pinned it out so that way we can hopefully easily see these stitches as I'm going to show you how to create them, okay? The first thing we're going to do is I want you to grab your contrasting color and I want you to take a piece of your yarn and put it onto your tapestry needle, okay? A bent tip tapestry needle is very handy for this. What we're gonna do is create a running stitch right where we plan on actually cutting our knitting. We have 10 stitches between this purl gutter is what I call it, and this purl gutter. So if you have your cast on edge down here, okay, this is your bind off edge and your cast on edge, we're going to read the stitches in this manner to where it looks like all the V's as we see them, okay, if I'm reading it in this way, all the V's represent one stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My plan to cut this sweater is to cut it between stitches 5 and 6. So I'm going to take my needle here and I'm going to place it between stitches 5 and 6. And I'm just going to give myself a little running stitch. So I'm going to go underneath, come back down, and then come back up, and then come back down, all the way down that column between stitches 5 and 6. And what this is doing really is just giving me a guideline for where I'm going to cut. It's also going to help me know where I need to place my reinforcement stitches, okay? This is really helpful when you're working with a fabric that is the same color. Like we didn't do any color work on ours in the middle of our project here. So having this running stitch there allows us to see, oh, look, that line right there, that's where I'm going to be cutting. So my stitch 5 and my stitch 6, if I'm reading from right to left, those are the stitches I'm going to begin to reinforce, okay? So what I like to do is actually a crocheted reinforcement, but the instructions I had written out indicate that we're supposed to do a back stitch reinforcement, which is equally wonderful and very easy to do. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. Let's talk about placement. There's a lot of discussion online about where you should place those reinforcement stitches. Should I place them directly right up the center of stitch number 5 and right up the center of stitch number 6? It's not a bad idea. You could totally do that. The other thing is, do I want to place them between 6 and 7? Do I want to place them in the center of 7? And the same thing over here. Do I want to put it in between 5 and 4 or right up the center of 4? You could do that as well. As a matter of fact, doing all of those together is a really great way to super reinforce your project. Now, when you're reinforcing your project, you want to make sure that these stitches here, let's say these are going up. The second row, we want to make sure those are going down. Same thing over here. We want to make sure you're going up and going down. So you have two directions of the reinforcement. Now, some of you out there might be like, well, Marley, I have a sewing machine. Can't I just use a sewing machine and do like a straight stitch up the two stitches on either side of where I'm going to cut? You absolutely can. I have a sewing machine. I'm not very proficient with it, and I know not everybody has a sewing machine, so I want to make sure I show people how to do this without a sewing machine. If you have one though, and you're very comfortable with it, and you can just stitch right down those lines, I say go for it. For everybody else, if you're like me, let's go ahead and let's learn how to do the back stitch along the steeking section, so that way we know how to reinforce our fabric. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside real quick and I'm going to bring in a lighter color swatch to show you how to do this back stitch, because I feel like it's easier to see on this lighter swatch. And it's one you guys saw when I showed you in the first section what a typical swatch would look like if you were just working back and forth. And I want to show you what the back stitch is. So I have a contrasting color yarn here, and I have it on a nice yarn needle here. And I have started right down here at the base of my swatch, and I'm working up the column of stitches, or right in between two stitches, just like I talked about. And essentially, it's sort of, I shouldn't say essentially, it's sort of like the mattress stitch. I'm going to go up 2 and back 1. So you can see here, I went back right here with this pink, and I went up and I came underneath that bar and I came out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back. I'm going to go underneath this bar. I'm going to go underneath that bar, and I'm going to go up that column and come out picking up that next bar. Can you see that? So I'm going to come out picking up that next bar. And I'm going to do that again. Go underneath and come back out. So it looks like there's 2 bars there. I actually just went underneath the bar that I just picked up. There's the new extra bar, and I come up. So I come up what was the new extra bar and go up one more. You can see there's 2 bars there, and come up. And you just continue this all the way up. And when you get to the top, let's pretend, let's put our imagination hats on. Let's pretend I'm to the top. I can actually cut over. So I'm going to cut over one. Let's come over here, and I can begin working in the opposite direction. You just go back 1 and up 2. So it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Hence the reason it's called a back stitch. And this, believe it or not, will reinforce those stitches. So when we cut our fabric, it will not unravel. You guys see this? Okay. It's pretty easy stuff. Okay, so you get these nice little bumps, but they are going around all of essentially the ladders of the stitch. You guys see that? Okay. Now, because I know some of you out there are by Crafty, I want to show you how you can use a crochet slip stitch to reinforce your steeking edge as well. All right, so I am adding a basting stitch right here to simulate that this is where we would cut our fabric. Okay, we're just going to use our little swatch here again as this example. Okay, so we're going to pretend that that is our cut line. Now, when you are working with crochet, what you want to do is just to kind of use the same numbers that we've been talking about before. Let's pretend this cut line is between stitch number 5 and stitch number 6. What we would want to do is we want to pick up the right leg of stitch number 5 and the left leg of stitch number 4. So we would pick those up just like so, and we would slip stitch those 2 stitches. Okay, so what you would do, we're here. We're just going to come up here. We're going to start down here at this end. We'll have one end go this way, the other one will go the opposite. So there's my center line. So here is my stitch number 5. Let's just pretend this is the right, not pretend, but like this is, let's see, this is the edge. So we would just pick up these 2. And now I can see the column. See how I have this column now just kind of really easily identified once I pick up the first 2. If I pinch my fabric, I can pinch my fabric and I can easily see like the column of V's. So what I would do at this point is I would take my yarn, and it's really great if you use a contrasting color for this, because once you cut your fabric, this contrasting color is visible on the inside edge and it just looks really pretty. But we would take our yarn over, pull up a loop, and we can go ahead, we could join with a slip stitch just to get it joined, right? And then you go to the next one. So I still have my fabric pinched. So I take my hook, go underneath the next 2 V's, just like you're doing a crochet stitch, right? And then pull it through. So it's like you're going through the top of a crochet stitch and then slip stitching. And you do this all the way down. And this is a way you could reinforce the fabric also. It's a very secure manner of doing it. And it's very pretty once it's all done. I actually prefer this method the most. To me, it feels the most secure. And you would just go the whole way, just like this. It helps to use a hook that's like a size or 2 smaller than the needles that you used. But you'll see here, once you go all the way to the end, you can go right off of the fabric. You could actually slip stitch along the edge of the fabric itself too, to kind of lock your slip stitches in place, as long as the won't be visible on the right side, you know. It's a great thing to do. So we can just keep going here. I have some garter stitch down here because I wasn't planning on doing this when I made this particular swatch, but we're just going to keep going with it. I'm just going to keep reinforcing, try and pick the same edge here. It's a little tricky because there's purl there, so I'm just going to go in, just make my path. And then down here at the bottom, simply just slip stitch along the edge, just like so, and then I can finish off. Now you have this really nice slip stitch reinforcement section, right? And it kind of butts up the fabric a little bit here because we're going to cut our steek between two stitches. We aren't actually cutting right down the center of a stitch. Like if we had an odd number of steek stitches, we could do that. But I prefer an even number of steek stitches and going between two stitches. I like it better. But so that's what you would do for the first side. For the second side, you would obviously turn your work 180 degrees. And over here, following the same concept of picking up the outside leg, right? And then the inside. So over here, this would be, it's like if we were looking at this before, we picked up the right side leg and the left side leg. For this side, it's going to be the left side leg and the right side leg, right? So you can come over here. Ideally, guys, you would start down here, but I'm going to start up here so you can easily see. There's our cut line. So there is that outside leg of what would be stitch number 6. Here's the inside leg of stitch number 7. Go between them. Pinch again. You have your line. And you do the same thing, working up this way. Now, again, ideally, if you're going to start, if you have an edge like this, you want to start down here at the very edge and work all the way up because you don't want to leave any of those stitches unworked. But if you did that, you would get another edge along this side that would give you that nice single crochet, not single crochet, slip stitch. Okay. Now you know 3 different ways to reinforce your stitches for a steek. You can sew them with a sewing machine. You could back stitch them by hand sewing, or you could do a crochet slip stitch. All of those ways are wonderful. Which way you choose is totally up to you. You can only do one reinforcement line on either side of your cut line, or you could do 2. You could do as many as you want, whatever you're comfortable with, okay? Now, I will let you know there's a lot of different instructions online for how to steek, so if you've learned a different way and it works for you, you can absolutely do it that way. I'm just showing you the way that I like, and I know many of you have never done this before, so let's give this a whirl. Plus, we're doing this on our swatch to begin with to make sure we like it. So let's go ahead and cut our swatch. So obviously, if I want to do a swatch and cut it, I need to go ahead and prepare the swatch. I decided that on one side of my cut line, I would go ahead and demonstrate how to do the slip stitch crochet reinforcement. So that's what you'll see I'm doing right here. I'm just going to work up between my stitches, just like I showed you earlier, and do my slip stitch of crochet. On the opposite side, I will do the back stitch reinforcement. I wanted to be able to easily show you the difference between the two once the fabric is cut. That way you can make an educated decision of what you're going to do. I highly recommend you do something like this as well with your swatch. Why not give it a try? Try both ways, see which one works better for you, see what you're most comfortable with. Now, I did only do one slip stitch crochet reinforcement edge. You could do 2. You could do another one on the other side of that one I just created. So you could have like a double happening, but one seemed to be sufficient enough for me, and that worked. You can see here, as I mentioned, this is where I was doing the back stitch, and I'm going to do it all the way up. Once I do that, I'll be ready to join you back here, and we can cut up that center line in the gold, and we'll see how this little piece of fabric comes apart, what it looks like. once we're comfortable with it, then we can tackle our sweater. And we are ready to go. I did add a slip stitch reinforcement line on this edge of my steek center. And then I did 2 rows of back stitches in what would have been stitch column number 6 and stitch column number 7. I figured I'd do one of each so you can see which one you like. Now at this point you can take out the basting thread if you want, or you could just leave it in place and then use it as your guide, as your cutting point, and that's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to tell you to do, everybody, is grab yourself a nice sharp pair of scissors. I prefer smaller scissors because I can control where the tips are going more easily, and I think you should do the same. We're going to make sure we come down here and through that part right there where we have that running stitch in that gold, that's where we're going to cut. Now, it isn't so scary to cut it on our little swatch, but it'll be a little bit terrifying when you do this on your sweater. However, that's why we cut on our swatch, to make sure it looks the way we want. All right, so make sure your scissors are in place. Make sure everything is where you want it to be. And snip. Not gonna lie, that sound is very satisfying. And we now have a cardigan, or you have 2 halves of your swatch. And take a look at this. So the half that had the single crochet edge, look at how nice and neat it is. I mean, it is just so pretty. And the raw edge there is going to naturally fold into the wrong side. It has this really nice clean edge. Yes, those little furry there, they will not unravel. This is not going to unravel. I'm going to take away my running thread. Obviously, that isn't part of it. But this will not unravel. That's all going to stay there in place. And with our crochet edge there, it looks nice and clean. And what's great is that because of that pearl gutter that we did on our cardigan, that pearl gutter is going to act as a turning point. So we can actually turn our facing, because our steek line here is now actually our facing, turn it to the wrong side of your fabric at that pearl line. And so now all of this will be on the inside, and you can whip stitch that nice edge down. And look how nice and clean it is with that single crochet. I mean, I'm kind of out of frame. I love the way that looks. So if you are by Crafty and you want to do that single crochet, it looks really great. But you can see there, when you fold it in, that's what it's going to look like. Okay, let's take a look at the other one. Obviously, this was a swatch, guys. That's why you have all those ends down there. So we have this one that we cut, right? So here's our running thread. We can pull that out, all the fuzz from the yellow, and we can see our edge here. So I have, this is the one where I did the back stitch. Okay, so you can see my gray back stitch. You can see my edge right here. This is the edge of my cut. Okay, that's a nothing. This is not coming undone. It's not coming undone. It's all in place. These back stitches are all in place, and there are 2 levels of it to make sure it stays. Once again, this edge that I cut wants to roll to the inside, just like stockinette naturally wants to roll towards the wrong side. So I will allow it to do that, and with my pearl gutter, I just fold it, and it goes to the inside, and I can stitch all that down. I will just leave all of those back stitches in place. You don't take them out, you leave them there, and there you have it. Okay. Okay, so I'm curious which one you prefer. I totally prefer the crochet one. I think it looks better. It feels more secure to me. It's definitely the cat's meow. Make sure you get your slip stitch in the bottom and the top all the way down that line. I think that's the way to go. But if you're not comfortable with the slip stitch, you can absolutely do that back stitch. All right, now that we've cut our swatch, why not go ahead, use your swatch, and let's practice picking up stitches for the button band. Because if you can do it on your swatch, you can absolutely do it on your sweater. All right, that's the last bit, you guys. Let's try this. Button band. Now, some of you might be thinking, man, Marley, can't I just leave this as a raw edge? And you could, it'll just look unfinished. I highly recommend doing the button band. Even if you never button your actual cardigan, you just leave it open, a button band is going to make it look nice and finished. Now, it really is not that hard to do a button band. We're just going to pick up stitches along that edge of our cardigan we just created and create some ribbing. So what you're going to do is we're going to pretend this is our cardigan, and here is our nice edge. And once again, we do have that purl ridge. What we want to do is we want to tuck our, this is now called our facing. We want to tuck our facing to the inside at that purl edge. And working along the body side, so not the facing side, but the body side of our fabric, on this edge of the purl. So here is our purl gutter. So right now my needle is in my purl gutter. I essentially want to pick up and knit stitches along this row right there. Now I have a choice to make, okay? This row right there, I could just go through the back bump of that row, but I don't like the way that looks. I like the way it looks when I go through the entire stitch. So what I'm going to do is when I fold this, I'm going to start down here, and just like I did when I did with my crochet hook going through 2 legs, this one is actually just going through the entire stitch, but I'm going through that entire column of stitches right next to the purl column. And yeah, that's going to put this column of stitches on the wrong side. I don't mind that. I'm actually okay with that. I am more willing to add an extra row to my, or even 2 rows to my button band to make it a little bit wider to compensate for this, because I love the way it looks. So once you put your needle through there, you're going to just pick up stitches and knit. So let's go ahead. I'm going to use a contrasting color so you can see it. And just like before, you'll yarn over your needle and you'll pull up a loop. You go to the next one, go through both, yarn over, pull up a loop. Go through both, yarn over, pull up a loop. Go through both, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now you're given a certain number of stitches you're supposed to pick up along your cardigan, and you want to make sure those are evenly spaced out. So take the total number of stitches you want to pick up on your cardigan, and then use stitch markers to section out your cardigan edge. So let's say that I needed to use a stitch marker like right there, and I needed to get however many, and then let's say I needed to use a stitch marker, you know, let's quarter it out. I'm not even doing it appropriately, like right there. And then you would use another one right down here to get 4. And so that's, maybe I need to have 4 stitches in each section. Well, you can see that some sections, maybe I'll need to skip one particular stitch so that way I can make sure my button band is evened out. So without doing a whole bunch of math, using stitch markers is a great way to evenly space out the number of stitches you're supposed to put along your button band, okay? So all I mean by that is, let's say right here, let's say I'm supposed to pick up another one, and let's say between this marker and this marker, I'm supposed to pick up 4. So let's say it would be just that one. So there's 1, and there's 2, and I can see that I have 3 more stitches that I could pick up in. So maybe I skip 1, and I go to the next and I pick up in that one, and I go to the next and I pick up in that one. So I got my 4 in that section, and they're evenly spaced out. Does that make sense? Now here's another tip. If you guys are like, Marley, I can't pick up my stitches like you, well, here's something you could do. If you use the other end of your circular needle and stick that one into where you want to pick up those stitches, okay, the pick up and knit, now you've just picked up stitches onto your left-hand needle. Now you did them. So go into, oops, go into it. If I can hold it, I have trouble holding all of this with this little tiny swatch here. So you're going to go in And then you're going to treat those as if they are a stitch on your left-hand needle. So you just go in and you're going to knit them. And then you go to the next one, you go in, and then you treat them like they're a stitch, and you knit them. I'm struggling with these blunt tip needles. But that's how you can use the other needle to help you out if you're having trouble just going into the stitch, picking up and knitting it. But I'm going to do this all the way down this row here, so that way you can see what the result looks like. And the great thing here, guys, is if you pick up your stitches like this and you get them all on your needle and you're like, I don't like that, it is no big deal to take your needle out and start again. You're not going to lose stitches or anything like that because you're just picking up and knitting. You're not actually like having any live stitches on there until you actually pick them up, right? So you go all the way to the edge. You can see I probably should have skipped one right there, but that's okay. I'm going to go like this. And you can see I picked up directly down that line. So I have uninterrupted stitches on this side. And if I take a look at the wrong side, yes, it totally puts that row that I picked, that I went through both loops, it puts it on the wrong side, on this side of the purl gutter. But I don't hate that. All right, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I don't hate that. Okay, I like it. I think it looks really good. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I like it. I think it looks really good. So that is how you would pick up stitches. Then you would carry on following the instructions, working in your knit one, purl one ribbing. When it comes to the button band, you simply will work those yarn overs for your buttonholes. Make sure you have those spaced out evenly as well, and make sure they are large enough for the buttons you plan on sewing on. Don't forget to change to your contrasting color for the last couple rounds, and you have a beautiful cardigan. Doesn't it feel great to be able to make a sweater 100% in the round and then cut it to turn it into a cardigan? I don't know if you're like me, but I wear cardigans a lot more than I wear pullovers, and doing a steeking process for a sweater in the round is the cat's meow. I think it is so fantastic. It's also a great way to venture into color work and then cutting the stitches to create a cardigan in color work, because if you've ever done color work, turning and purling with color work is such a pain in the rear. So being able to use the steeking technique to your advantage with color work is awesome. All right, now that you guys have cut your sweaters, you can absolutely call yourself capital K knitters. When you finish these sweaters, be sure to share with us on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag Yarnspirations so we can see your sweater and smash your like button. I hope you enjoyed this knit along with Marley Bird, and you'll join me once again for another one right here on the Yarnspirations YouTube channel. I'll talk to you guys again very soon. Bye, guys.